The knock came at 3:47 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. I remember the exact time because I had just glanced at the clock on my microwave, thinking about whether it was too early to start preparing dinner. I wasn't expecting anyone. At 70 years old, living alone in my small ranch house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, unexpected visitors were rare. Most of my friends called first, and the delivery drivers just left packages on the porch. But this knock was different. It wasn't the casual rat-tat-tat of a neighbor or the authoritative bang of a delivery. It was hesitant, almost tentative, like the person on the other side was gathering courage with each rap of their knuckles against the wood. I dried my hands on the dish towel I'd been holding and walked slowly to the front door. My knees aren't what they used to be, and I've learned not to rush. Through the frosted glass panel, I could make out the silhouette of a woman, average height, standing very still. When I opened the door, I found myself looking at a stranger. She appeared to be in her mid-40s, with auburn hair pulled back in a loose ponytail and eyes that were a striking shade of green. She wore jeans and a blue cardigan, clutching a brown leather purse against her stomach like a shield. But it was her face that made my breath catch. There was something hauntingly familiar about the shape of her chin, the way her eyebrows arched slightly at the outer corners. "Mrs. Mitchell," she asked, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Lorraine Mitchell?" "Yes," I replied, my hand still on the doorknob. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached into her purse with shaking hands and pulled out a photograph. An old photograph, creased and faded, in a plastic sleeve. She held it out to me, and I took it automatically, not understanding yet why my heart had started to pound. The photograph showed a young woman in a hospital bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny newborn wrapped in a pink blanket. The woman in the picture was me, 45 years younger, my dark hair longer then, my face unlined and full of joy. And the baby in my arms was wearing a small hospital bracelet on her impossibly tiny wrist. "My name is Sarah," the woman at my door said, and I heard tears in her voice. "Sarah Mitchell. I was born on April 12, 1979, at Mercy Medical Center. And I think I'm your daughter." The photograph slipped from my fingers and fluttered to the porch floor. The world tilted sideways, and I had to grab the doorframe to keep from falling. 45 years. 45 years of grief, of searching, of wondering, of praying for a miracle that never came. Until now. Until this moment, standing in my doorway on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why this moment shattered and rebuilt my entire world in the span of a heartbeat, I need to take you back. Back to where it all began, to the worst day of my life, and to the 45 years of agony that followed. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If you're listening to this story, if you're here with me right now, I need you to know how much it means that you're taking the time to hear what happened to me. These stories, these real experiences from real women like me, they matter. And sharing them, keeping them alive, that's how we support each other. So if you haven't already, please take just 1 second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I promise you won't regret it. And if you would, please give this video a like. It takes less time than a heartbeat, but it helps this channel reach other women who might need to hear that they're not alone, that their pain matters, that there's always hope. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you think of this story as it unfolds, and let me know what city or country you're watching from. It reminds me that we're all connected, all part of this incredible community of survivors and supporters. Thank you for being here. Now let me take you back to where it all started. I was born Lorraine Ellen Harper in 1954, in a small farming community about 20 miles outside Cedar Rapids. My parents, Thomas and Ellen Harper, were good, hardworking people who'd lived in Iowa their entire lives. Dad worked at a meatpacking plant, coming home every evening with his shoulders bent from the physical labor, his hands rough and cracked despite the thick gloves he wore. Mom stayed home with us kids, though she took in sewing and mending to help make ends meet. There were 5 of us children, my older brothers James and Robert, me in the middle, and my younger sisters Patricia and Diane. We didn't have much growing up, but we had enough. We lived in a white clapboard house with a sagging front porch and a vegetable garden out back that Mom tended with fierce dedication. In the summer, we'd eat tomatoes still warm from the sun, and in the fall, she'd can everything we couldn't eat fresh. The basement shelves would fill up with mason jars of green beans, pickles, tomato sauce, and peach preserves, a rainbow of security against the hard Iowa winters. I was a quiet child, more comfortable with books than with the rough and tumble play of my brothers. I'd spend hours in the tiny Cedar Rapids Public Library, just a 20-minute bike ride from our house, losing myself in stories of far-off places and exciting adventures. My favorite spot was the window seat in the back corner, where afternoon sunlight would stream through and dust motes would dance in the golden beams. School came easily to me, especially science and biology. I was fascinated by how the human body worked, how all these complicated systems functioned together to keep us alive. My biology teacher, Mrs. Henderson, a stern woman with gray hair always pulled back in a tight bun, noticed my interest and encouraged me to consider nursing. "You've got the temperament for it, Lorraine," she told me one day after class, her usually strict face softening. "You're patient, detail-oriented, and you genuinely care about people. Those are the qualities that make a good nurse." The idea took root in my imagination, but nursing school was expensive, and my family simply didn't have that kind of money. My brothers were already working at the plant with Dad, and it was understood that what little money could be spared would go toward helping them eventually buy their own places or start their own families. As the middle daughter, higher education wasn't really in the cards for me. So instead, when I graduated high school in 1972, I enrolled in a training program to become a nurse's aide. It wasn't exactly what I dreamed of, but it was close enough. I could work in a medical setting, help people, learn about patient care. The program was only a few months long, and the Cedar Rapids Medical Center hired me right after I completed it. I started on the night shift, which paid a little extra, working from 11 at night until 7 in the morning. I met Daniel Mitchell at the hospital. He wasn't a patient, thank goodness. He was a maintenance technician, responsible for keeping all the equipment running, fixing things that broke, maintaining the heating and cooling systems. Daniel was 24, 2 years older than me, with sandy blonde hair that was always a little too long and kind blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. He had this wonderful, easy laugh that could lighten even the most stressful night shift. We started dating in the fall of 1973. Daniel would bring me coffee during my breaks, and we'd sit in the empty cafeteria, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in Des Moines, about losing his mother to cancer when he was just 16, about his dream of someday having a family of his own to love and protect. I told him about my books, my dreams of travel, my hope that someday I could go back to school and become a registered nurse. "You will," he said with absolute certainty one night, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I'll make sure of it. We'll save up together and you'll go back to school." Daniel proposed on Christmas Eve 1974, right there in my parents' living room with my whole family watching. He got down on one knee, and his hands were shaking so badly that he almost dropped the small velvet box. The ring was modest, a simple gold band with a tiny diamond. But to me, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I said yes before he even finished asking the question, and my sisters squealed with delight while my brothers clapped Daniel on the back so hard he nearly fell over. We married in June of 1975 at the First Presbyterian Church in Cedar Rapids. It was a small wedding, just family and a few close friends. I wore my mother's wedding dress, altered to fit me, and carried daisies from Mrs. Patterson's garden next door. Daniel wore a borrowed suit that was slightly too big for him, but he looked so handsome standing at that altar, waiting for me to walk down the aisle on my father's arm. We couldn't afford a honeymoon, So we spent our wedding night at the Ramada Inn on the edge of town, eating pizza we'd ordered from the front desk and watching Johnny Carson on the television. It was perfect. We were young, in love, and the whole world seemed full of possibility. We rented a small apartment on the second floor of a converted house on 3rd Avenue. It was nothing fancy, just a bedroom, a living room, a tiny kitchen, and a bathroom with tiles that were starting to crack. But we made it home. I sewed curtains for the windows, bright yellow ones that let in the sunlight. Daniel built us a bookshelf from scrap lumber he brought home from the hospital. We bought our furniture piece by piece from garage sales and thrift stores, refinishing what needed it, making do with what we had. Those first few years of marriage were happy ones. We both worked hard, Daniel picking up extra shifts whenever he could, me working my way from night shift to day shift to evenings as openings came up. We saved every penny we could, dreaming of the future. Daniel kept his promise about helping me go back to school, and we opened a special savings account just for my tuition. It was growing slowly but surely, a few dollars at a time. We talked about children, of course. Daniel wanted a whole house full, at least 4 or 5. I was more cautious, wanting to wait until we were more financially stable, until I'd completed my nursing degree. But biology and love don't always wait for perfect timing. In the summer of 1978, I started feeling tired all the time, nauseated in the mornings. At first, I thought I was coming down with the flu that was going around the hospital. But when the symptoms persisted for 2 weeks, one of the nurses I worked with, Brenda Simpson, a motherly woman in her 50s who'd delivered 4 children of her own, gave me a knowing look. "Honey, when's the last time you had your period?" she asked me one afternoon when we were restocking supplies in the medication room. I stopped counting bandages and thought about it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. 6 weeks. It had been 6 weeks, maybe 7. "Oh my God," I whispered. Brenda smiled and patted my arm. "I think you better take a pregnancy test, sweetheart." I bought one on my way home from work that evening. From the pharmacy on 1st Avenue, where I hoped I wouldn't run into anyone I knew. My hands shook as I paid for it, stuffing it quickly into my purse. At home, I waited until Daniel left for his shift at the hospital before I worked up the courage to use it. 2 lines. Pregnant. I sat on the bathroom floor, staring at that test stick, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions. Fear, because we weren't ready financially. Excitement, because this was a baby, a real baby, mine and Daniel's. Joy, because despite my practical concerns, I knew I already loved this tiny cluster of cells growing inside me. Worry, because what about nursing school? What about our savings? What about our carefully laid plans? When Daniel came home the next morning, I was waiting at the kitchen table, the pregnancy test sitting in front of me like evidence. He walked in, saw my face, saw the test, and his eyes went wide. "Are you?" he started. "I'm pregnant," I said, and then I started crying, all those conflicting emotions spilling out at once. Daniel crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into his arms. Hey, it's okay," he murmured into my hair. "It's wonderful." "This is wonderful, Lorraine. We're going to have a baby. Our baby." "But nursing school," I sobbed against his chest. "And the money. And we're not ready. And—" "We'll figure it out," he said firmly, pulling back to look at me, cupping my face in his hands. "We always do. Nursing school can wait a few years, and yeah, money will be tight, but we'll make it work. People have been having babies since the beginning of time, and most of them had way less than we do. We have each other, we have jobs, we have a place to live. We'll be fine. Better than fine. We're going to be parents, Lorraine." Parents. His certainty was contagious. By the time he finished talking, I was smiling through my tears, nodding, starting to let myself feel the pure joy of it. A baby. Our baby. The pregnancy was relatively easy, all things considered. Morning sickness lasted through the first trimester, but after that, I felt better than I had in years. I glowed, everyone said so. My skin was clear, my hair was thick and shiny, and despite the growing belly, I felt strong and healthy. Daniel was wonderful, attentive without being overbearing, excited in a way that made everything feel like an adventure. He read pregnancy books cover to cover, more thoroughly than I did. He painted the second bedroom in our apartment a soft yellow, since we'd decided not to find out the baby's sex, wanting to be surprised. My due date was April 15th, 1979. Tax day, Daniel joked, saying our child would either grow up to be an accountant or a rebel who hated paperwork. We spent the final weeks preparing, washing tiny clothes my mother and sisters had given me at the baby shower, arranging and rearranging the nursery, packing and repacking my hospital bag. Everything was ready. We were ready. But nothing could have prepared us for what was about to happen. Nothing could have prepared us for the nightmare that would begin the moment our daughter was born. The nightmare that would last 45 years, until that knock on my door on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. Labor started on April 11th, 4 days before my due date. I woke up at 2:00 a.m. with a dull ache in my lower back and a tightening sensation across my belly. At first, I thought it was just more of the Braxton Hicks contractions I'd been having for weeks, but these felt different, more purposeful, more rhythmic. I lay in bed timing them for about an hour, not wanting to wake Daniel unnecessarily. But when they started coming every 7 minutes, I reached over and shook his shoulder gently. "Daniel," I whispered, "I think this is it. I think I'm in labor." He sat up so fast, he nearly gave himself whiplash, instantly awake and alert. "Are you sure? How far apart are the contractions? Did your water break? Should we go to the hospital now? Do you need anything?" Despite the pain, I couldn't help but smile at his panic. "Slow down, honey. They're 7 minutes apart, my water hasn't broken yet, and we probably have time. But yes, I think we should start heading to the hospital soon." We arrived at Mercy Medical Center at 4:30 a.m., just as the sky was beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn. The hospital was quiet at that hour, the night shift winding down, the day shift not yet arrived. A nurse named Carol checked me in and got me settled in a labor and delivery room. I was dilated to 4 centimeters already. "Progressing nicely," she said. "First baby?" she asked as she helped me into a hospital gown, and when I nodded, she smiled. "You're doing great. Some first-time moms don't get this far until they've been in labor for hours and hours. Your body knows what it's doing." Daniel stayed with me the whole time, holding my hand through contractions, wiping my forehead with a cool washcloth, talking to me in a soft, steady voice. The hours blurred together, pain and rest and pain again, the world narrowing to just my body and the work it was doing, bringing our child into the world. At 3:17 p.m. on April 12, 1979, after 13 hours of labor, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell came into the world. She weighed 7 pounds, 3 ounces, and she had a full head of dark hair and the tiniest, most perfect fingers I'd ever seen. When the doctor placed her on my chest, still covered in vernix and blood, making small mewling sounds, I felt my heart crack open with a love so fierce and immediate it took my breath away. "She's perfect," Daniel whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at our daughter. "Lorraine, she's absolutely perfect." They let me hold her for several minutes before taking her to clean her up, measure her, do all the routine checks. I watched through exhausted, tear-filled eyes as the nurses worked efficiently, calling out her measurements, her APGAR scores, everything normal, everything healthy. They wrapped her in a pink blanket, put a tiny hat on her head to keep her warm, and fastened a small plastic bracelet around her impossibly small wrist with her name, my name, and the time of birth. When they brought her back to me, clean and swaddled, she was sleeping peacefully, her little face relaxed and content. I examined every inch of her, counting her fingers and toes, marveling at her button nose and rosebud mouth. She was a miracle, our miracle, and I couldn't imagine ever loving anything more than I loved her in that moment. The nurses eventually moved me to a recovery room, a shared space with 3 other beds separated by curtains. The woman in the bed next to mine had delivered twin boys, and I could hear her husband's excited voice telling her how proud he was. Across the room, another new mother was trying to nurse her baby for the first time, guided by a patient nurse. Daniel had to leave at 8:00 p.m. when visiting hours ended. He didn't want to go, lingering by my bedside, kissing both Sarah and me multiple times. "I'll be back first thing in the morning," he promised. "The second they allow visitors, I'll be here. I love you both so much." "We love you too," I said, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Drive safely." After he left, I spent another hour just watching Sarah sleep in the bassinet beside my bed. I couldn't take my eyes off her, couldn't quite believe she was real, that she was mine. Around 10:00 p.m., one of the night nurses, a woman I didn't recognize, came by. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need to take the baby to the nursery for the night," she said, reaching for Sarah's bassinet. I felt a flutter of anxiety in my chest. "Can't she stay here with me?" The nurse smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Hospital policy, I'm afraid. All newborns spend their first night in the nursery under observation. We need to monitor them, make sure everything's okay. You need to rest, too. Labor takes a lot out of you. We'll bring her back for feeding every few hours." It made sense, I supposed. I was exhausted, my body ached, and the hospital had been doing this for decades. They knew what they were doing. Still, as I watched her wheel Sarah's bassinet out of the room, I felt an irrational urge to call out, to tell her to wait, to bring my baby back. But I didn't. I was young, 25 years old, and I trusted the hospital, trusted the system, trusted that everyone was looking out for my daughter's best interests. I should have trusted my instincts instead. I fell asleep around midnight, exhausted from labor, my body desperately needing rest. I woke a few hours later, expecting a nurse to bring Sarah for her feeding, but no one came. I waited, watching the clock on the wall tick from 3:00 to 3:30 to 4:00. Finally, I pressed the call button. A different nurse appeared, a young woman who looked barely out of nursing school. "Can I help you?" "My baby," I said. "Sarah, she should be here for her feeding by now." The nurse looked confused, checked the clipboard at the foot of my bed. "Oh, the night nurse must have bottle-fed her in the nursery so you could sleep. First-time moms need their rest." Something about that felt wrong, but I was groggy and foggy-headed, and she said it with such confidence that I accepted it. "When will they bring her to me?" "Probably at the next scheduled feeding, around 6. Try to get some more sleep." But I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, listening to the sounds of the hospital at night, feeling increasingly uneasy. When 6:00 a.m. came and went with no sign of Sarah, I pressed the call button again. This time, a different nurse responded, an older woman who'd been working at Mercy for years. I recognized her from my time as a nurse's aide, though I'd never worked closely with her. Her name tag read, Barbara. "Good morning, Mrs. Mitchell. How are you feeling?" "I need my baby," I said, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. "Sarah, I haven't seen her since last night, and they keep telling me she's being fed in the nursery. But I need to see her. I need to hold her." Barbara frowned slightly, a small crease appearing between her eyebrows. "Let me check on that for you, hun. Sometimes the night shift gets busy and things get delayed." She left, and I waited, my anxiety growing with each passing minute. 10 minutes became 20, 20 became 30. I could hear the hospital waking up around me, the day shift arriving, carts rattling in the hallways, other babies crying. But not my Sarah. When Barbara finally returned, she wasn't alone. A doctor I'd never seen before was with her, and the expression on his face made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, and there was something wrong about his tone, something careful and measured that set off every alarm bell in my body. I'm Dr. Harrison, the hospital administrator. I need to speak with you about your daughter. Where is she? I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Where's Sarah? What's wrong? Is she okay? Dr. Harrison pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down, and that's when I knew. That's when I knew something was terribly, horribly wrong. Doctors don't sit down to deliver good news. Mrs. Mitchell, I'm very sorry, but we can't locate your baby. She's not in the nursery. The words didn't make sense. They entered my ears, but my brain couldn't process them. What do you mean you can't locate her? She's a newborn baby. She's in a hospital. How can you not locate her? We're searching the entire hospital right now. We've checked every nursery, every examination room, every storage area. We're interviewing every staff member who was on duty last night. But right now, at this moment, we don't know where she is. The room started to spin. I gripped the bed rails, my knuckles turning white. You're telling me someone took my baby? Someone stole my baby from the hospital nursery? We don't know that for certain yet, Dr. Harrison said, but his eyes told me he absolutely believed that's what happened. We've called the police. They're on their way. But Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to stay calm. We're doing everything we can to find her. I started screaming then. I screamed for my baby. I screamed for Daniel. I screamed until my throat was raw and nurses had to hold me down because I was trying to rip out my IV and run to the nursery myself. Someone gave me a sedative, and the world went fuzzy and distant, but even drugged, even forcibly calmed. The terror and the anguish were still there, sharp and cutting like broken glass in my chest. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, running into the room white-faced and panicked, having been called by the hospital. I reached for him, and he held me while I sobbed into his shoulder, both of us shaking, both of us unable to comprehend what was happening. The police came. Detectives in plain clothes, uniformed officers, asking questions that felt invasive and horrible. Did I have enemies? Had anyone threatened me during my pregnancy? Had I noticed anyone paying unusual attention to me? The questions felt like accusations, like somehow this was my fault for not being more careful, for trusting the hospital, for letting them take my baby to the nursery in the first place. They interviewed every staff member who'd been on duty that night. They discovered that the nurse who'd taken Sarah to the nursery wasn't a nurse at all. No one could identify her. She'd been wearing scrubs and a hospital badge. But the badge was fake, the name on it belonging to no one in the hospital's employment records. Security footage from the elevators showed a woman in scrubs carrying a baby bundled in blankets, leaving through the emergency exit at 11:47 p.m., less than 2 hours after she'd taken Sarah from my room. The woman's face was partially obscured by a surgical mask and cap, common enough in a hospital that no one had questioned it. In the grainy footage, all I could see was that she was average height, average build, brown hair visible beneath the cap. She could have been anyone. She could have been anywhere. The police issued an Amber Alert, though the system was new then, not as widespread or effective as it would become in later years. They checked bus stations, airports, border crossings. They interviewed hundreds of people. They followed every lead, every tip, every possible sighting. But Sarah was gone, vanished as completely as if she'd never existed, except she had existed. I had the stretch marks to prove it, the stitches from my episiotomy, the breast milk that came in despite having no baby to feed. I had the hospital bracelet with her name on it, the one they'd put on my wrist, matching hers. I had the tiny hat they'd placed on her head, the only thing of hers I had left. The days after were a blur of grief and investigation. The police camped out in our apartment, tapping our phone in case a ransom call came. It never did. This wasn't a kidnapping for money. This was something else, something worse. Someone had wanted a baby, and they'd taken mine. The story made the local news, then the regional news. My face was on television, Daniel's too, both of us pleading for whoever had taken Sarah to return her, to leave her at a church or a fire station, or anywhere she'd be found safely. We offered rewards we couldn't afford, promised we wouldn't press charges, said anything we thought might bring her back. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and Sarah didn't come home. The investigation eventually went cold. The detective assigned to the case, a weary man named Frank Morrison, who had daughters of his own, promised he'd never close it, never stop looking. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't expect to find her. Too much time had passed. Whoever had taken her was long gone, probably with a forged birth certificate and a whole new identity for my daughter. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could see the helplessness in their eyes. My mother would come over and clean my apartment while I sat motionless on the couch, staring at nothing. My father would try to get Daniel to eat, to sleep, to take care of himself. My sisters brought casseroles and sympathy, but what could anyone say? There were no words that could touch this kind of pain. Daniel and I grew distant in our grief. We loved each other, but the loss of Sarah created a chasm between us that we didn't know how to cross. Every conversation eventually circled back to her, to what we should have done differently, to what-ifs that had no answers. We'd see babies in the grocery store, in the park, on television, and the pain would hit us fresh every time, as sharp as that first moment when Dr. Harrison told us she was gone. I went back to work after 6 weeks, not because I was ready, but because we needed the money, and I couldn't stand being in the apartment anymore, surrounded by the nursery we'd prepared, the tiny clothes hanging in the closet, the teddy bear sitting on the shelf. Work was a blessed distraction, a place where I could focus on other people's problems, other people's pain. But I never worked in labor and delivery again. I couldn't. I transferred to the general medical floor, working with adult patients, staying as far away from pregnant women and newborns as possible. Even so, I'd sometimes hear a baby crying somewhere in the hospital, and it would stop me in my tracks, my heart clenching, wondering if it was her, if somehow, impossibly, she'd come back. Years passed. Daniel and I stayed together, bound by our shared grief if nothing else. We never had more children. We tried briefly when I was 32, thinking maybe another baby would help heal the wound Sarah had left. But I miscarried at 8 weeks, and after that, I couldn't bring myself to try again. It felt like a betrayal of Sarah somehow, like I was trying to replace her, even though I knew rationally that's not how it worked. Daniel developed health problems in his 50s, likely stress-related. His blood pressure was through the roof, and he had his first heart attack at 59. The second one, 2 years later, killed him. He died in 2014, at 61 years old, and his last words to me were about Sarah. "Do you think she's happy?" he asked, his hand in mine in the hospital room, the monitors beeping their terrible rhythm. "Wherever she is, whoever's raising her, do you think she's happy?" "I hope so," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I have to believe she's happy, Daniel. I have to." He died believing he'd failed to protect his daughter, died without ever knowing what happened to her, without ever getting to see her grow up, hold her again, tell her he loved her. That guilt and grief literally broke his heart. After Daniel's death, I was truly alone. My parents had passed years before. My siblings had their own families, their own lives. I retired from the hospital at 65 and settled into a quiet life in the house Daniel and I had bought in our 40s, a small ranch on the east side of Cedar Rapids. I had a garden, a book club, some friends from church. I kept myself busy. But Sarah was always there, a constant ache, a hole in my heart that never healed. I celebrated her birthday every year, baking a cake and sitting alone at my kitchen table, singing happy birthday to a daughter who wasn't there. I wondered what she looked like, whether she had my dark hair or Daniel's blue eyes, whether she was tall or short, what her voice sounded like, what made her laugh. I never stopped looking for her. Even after the investigation went cold, even after the police moved on to other cases, I searched. I joined registry databases for adoptees looking for birth parents. I posted in online forums. I sent letters to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children every few months with updated information. I hired a private investigator twice, spending money I didn't have, both times coming up empty. I'd started to accept that I would die without ever knowing what happened to my daughter, without ever seeing her again, without ever getting answers. I'd started to make peace with carrying that grief to my grave. And then came the knock on my door on that Tuesday afternoon. The woman standing on my porch, holding that old photograph, claiming to be Sarah Mitchell, my stolen daughter, couldn't possibly be real. It was impossible. It was a dream, a hallucination, a cruel trick. But she had the photograph. She had the birth date. She knew my name. And when I looked past my initial shock and really studied her face, I could see Daniel in the shape of her eyes, my mother in the curve of her cheekbone, my father in her strong jaw. How? I started, but my voice broke. How did you find me? Can I come in? She asked gently. This is a long story, and I think we both need to sit down. I stepped back, holding the door open, my mind spinning, my heart racing. Sarah, 45 years old now, stepped into my house, into my life, bringing with her 45 years of questions, 45 years of answers I'd thought I'd never get. She sat on my couch, and I sat across from her in the armchair, unable to take my eyes off her, still not quite believing she was real. She pulled out a folder from her purse, thick with papers and documents. I need to tell you everything, she said, and I need you to know that I only learned the truth 3 months ago. For 45 years, I had no idea I was stolen. I thought I was just Sarah Brennan, adopted daughter of Margaret and Thomas Brennan, from Waterloo, Iowa. At that moment, something dark stirred in my memory. Waterloo. Just 90 miles from Cedar Rapids. My daughter had been less than 2 hours away for 45 years. This revelation left me reeling, but I pushed through the shock because I needed to know everything. I needed Sarah to tell me her story, the life she'd lived while I mourned her, the truth about who had taken her and why. And she did tell me, sitting in my living room on that Tuesday afternoon, revealing details that would make my blood boil and my heart break all over again, but also fill me with a fierce determination to make sure justice was finally served. But that confrontation moment is still to come. First, I need to tell you about the signs I'd missed 45 years ago, the warning bells I didn't recognize, the details that might have saved my daughter if only I'd been paying closer attention. There were 6 specific incidents in the weeks leading up to Sarah's birth that I should have noticed, should have questioned. At the time, I dismissed them all as coincidences or my pregnancy hormones making me paranoid. Looking back now, with the knowledge Sarah brought to my doorstep, I can see them for what they were. Reconnaissance, planning, a predator circling her prey. The first incident happened when I was 7 months pregnant, in early February 1979. I'd gone to the grocery store after my shift at the hospital, tired and eager to get home, but needing to pick up milk and bread. As I was loading my cart, struggling a bit because my belly was getting in the way, a woman approached me in the dairy aisle. She was probably in her late 30s or early 40s, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail and a friendly smile. She wore a tan winter coat and carried a basket with just a few items in it. "Oh, look at you," she exclaimed, gesturing to my pregnant belly. "You must be so excited. Is this your first?" I smiled, used to strangers commenting on my pregnancy. "Yes, it is, due in April." "How wonderful," she said, and there was something intense in her eyes that I noticed but didn't really process. "Do you know if it's a boy or a girl?" We decided not to find out. We want to be surprised. She asked me several more questions, a lot of questions actually, thinking back on it now. Where was I delivering? Was it Mercy Medical Center? Did I have a doctor there? What was my name? At the time, I thought she was just being friendly, making conversation the way women do about pregnancies. I answered all her questions openly, never considering that this was anything other than small talk. Before she left, she touched my belly, which I normally didn't like strangers doing, but she did it so quickly I didn't have time to step back. "Such a blessing," she said. "You're so lucky. Some women can't have children of their own, you know. They'd give anything for what you have." The comment struck me as odd, a little intense, but I brushed it off. She walked away, and I finished my shopping and went home. I mentioned it to Daniel that night, but only in passing, telling him about the friendly woman at the store. We laughed about how pregnant women became public property, how everyone felt entitled to touch your belly and give advice. I never connected her to what happened later. But Sarah showed me, 45 years later, that the woman who took her from the hospital nursery matched the description of the woman in the grocery store. Same build, same brown hair. It was her, I'm certain of it now. She was shopping for a baby, and she'd found me. The second sign came 2 weeks later at my prenatal appointment at Mercy Medical. I was sitting in the waiting room, flipping through an outdated magazine when I noticed a woman staring at me from across the room. She was wearing different clothes than the grocery store woman, but there was something familiar about her face. When I looked directly at her, she quickly looked away, picking up a magazine and pretending to read it. I felt a prickle of unease down my spine, that instinctive warning that something wasn't quite right. But the waiting room was full of pregnant women and their families, all strangers to each other, and I told myself I was being paranoid. Pregnant women were naturally protective, naturally anxious about their babies. It was normal to be on edge. When my name was called, I got up and went back to the examination rooms. As I was leaving after my appointment, I saw the same woman still in the waiting room, and I could have sworn she wasn't pregnant. She was wearing a loose sweater, but there was no visible belly. I almost asked the receptionist about her, almost said something about how strange it was that someone would sit in an OB waiting room if they weren't a patient. But I didn't. I figured maybe she was waiting for someone else, or maybe she was newly pregnant and not showing yet, or maybe it was none of my business. Another missed opportunity. Another warning sign ignored. The third incident was more unsettling, though again, I rationalized it away. I was 8 months pregnant by then. It was mid-March, and Daniel had just left for the night shift at the hospital. I was getting ready for bed around 10:30 p.m. when I heard a car idling on our street. Our apartment was on the second floor, and my bedroom window looked out over 3rd Avenue. I peered through the curtains and saw a dark sedan parked directly across from our building, engine running, headlights off. I watched for a few minutes, wondering if maybe someone was just picking up a passenger or dropping someone off. But the car just sat there, and I couldn't see anyone inside clearly because the street light was too far away. After about 10 minutes, I started to feel genuinely frightened. Our neighborhood was generally safe, but we'd had some car break-ins recently, and I was alone and very pregnant. I called the non-emergency police line and reported a suspicious vehicle. The dispatcher said they'd send a patrol car to check it out. I watched from my window, and sure enough, about 15 minutes later, a police car cruised slowly down 3rd Avenue. The moment it came into view, the sedan's engine revved and it drove away quickly, turning at the corner and disappearing. The police officer parked where the sedan had been and came up to talk to me. I described what I'd seen, but without a license plate number or a better description, there wasn't much they could do. The officer, a young man who looked barely old enough to be out of high school, assured me they'd increase patrols in the area and told me to call immediately if I saw the car again. I did see it again, her even after she was stolen away. This story you're hearing right now is so important, and if you've made it this far with me, I want to thank you. But I also want to ask you to do something simple that would mean the world to me. If you're feeling the weight of what I've shared, if this story has touched you in any way, please hit that like button. It takes 1 second, just one click, but it helps this channel reach others who might need to hear these stories of loss, hope, and justice. And please, drop a comment telling me what you think about everything that's happened so far. I want to know if you think I'm doing the right thing, if you understand the decisions I'm making, And please tell me where you're watching from, what city or country. It helps me feel less alone in this. Thank you for being here with me through this journey. Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I spent almost every day together, building the relationship we'd been robbed of, trying to compress 45 years of mother-daughter bonding into whatever time we had left. She brought David and the kids to meet me, and I fell in love with my grandchildren instantly. Emma was 16, with Sarah's green eyes and a quick wit that reminded me of Daniel. Jack was 14, quieter, thoughtful, with a passion for science that made my heart ache with recognition. They called me Grandma Lorraine, and hearing those words from their mouths felt like a miracle every single time. But alongside this joy, this blessing of reunion, I was planning. Sarah and I had agreed to go public with the truth about Margaret Brennan, but we wanted to do it right, in a way that would maximize impact and minimize harm to innocent people. We hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chen, who specialized in cases involving identity theft and fraud. She helped us navigate the legal aspects of what we were about to do. Detective Frank Morrison, now long retired but still living in Cedar Rapids, came to visit when he heard about Sarah's reappearance. He was in his late 70s now, his hair completely white, his face deeply lined, but his eyes still sharp and intelligent. When he saw Sarah, he actually started crying. "I never thought I'd see this day," he said, hugging her carefully like she might disappear again if he held too tight. "I never gave up on your case, not really, but I didn't think. I never thought." He helped us document everything properly, creating an official report that updated the original case file. The kidnapping was solved 45 years later. Margaret Brennan, deceased, was the perpetrator. Case closed. But it wasn't closed, not really. Because even though Margaret was dead, even though we couldn't prosecute her, Sarah and I wanted accountability. We wanted the world to know what she'd done. We decided to hold a press conference. Patricia helped us prepare statements, coached us on how to handle questions, warned us about the media frenzy that would likely ensue. Sarah was nervous, worried about the impact on her children, on Margaret's surviving relatives, on the community in Waterloo that had known Margaret as a respected nurse and devoted mother. But I was resolute. Margaret Brennan had stolen my baby, destroyed my marriage, contributed to my husband's early death, and robbed me of 45 years with my daughter. She didn't deserve to have her reputation protected. She didn't deserve to be remembered kindly. The press conference was held on a Monday morning in late October 2024 at the Cedar Rapids Police Department. The room was packed with reporters, cameras, microphones. Sarah and I sat at a table at the front, Patricia on one side of me, Detective Morrison on the other side of Sarah. I spoke first, reading from a prepared statement, but looking up frequently to make eye contact with the cameras, wanting people to see my face, to understand the human cost of what Margaret Brennan had done. My name is Lorraine Mitchell. On April 12, 1979, I gave birth to a daughter, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, at Mercy Medical Center here in Cedar Rapids. Less than 2 hours after she was born, my daughter was stolen from the hospital nursery by a woman named Margaret Brennan, a nurse from Waterloo, Iowa. For 45 years, I believed my daughter was lost forever. For 45 years, I mourned her, searched for her, prayed for her return. My husband, Daniel Mitchell, died in 2014 without ever knowing what happened to our only child. The grief of losing Sarah contributed to health problems that eventually took his life. I paused, letting that sink in, watching reporters scribble notes. 3 months ago, Sarah knocked on my door. She had recently discovered, through documents her adoptive mother left after her death from cancer, that she had been stolen from Mercy Medical as an infant. She found me through the original news reports and registry databases. Sarah is here today to tell her own story, but I want to make one thing absolutely clear. Margaret Brennan committed a heinous crime. She stalked me for months during my pregnancy, planned meticulously, and executed the theft of my newborn baby with cold precision. She then raised Sarah as her own, never telling her the truth, never expressing remorse, never attempting to make amends. I looked directly into the main camera. Margaret Brennan is dead, so she will never face legal consequences for what she did. But I am here today to make sure that history remembers her accurately, not as a loving mother who adopted a child, but as a criminal who destroyed multiple lives for her own selfish desires. The truth matters. Justice matters. And Sarah and I deserve to have our truth acknowledged. Then Sarah spoke, her voice shaking at first, but growing stronger as she went. She described her childhood, how Margaret had been a good mother in practical terms, but had built everything on a foundation of lies. She talked about the box of evidence Margaret had left, about the letter confessing to the crime. She read portions of that letter aloud, and I watched as reporters' faces changed from professional interest to genuine shock and horror. When Sarah finished reading, she looked up, tears streaming down her face. I loved the woman I called Mom. She raised me, cared for me, supported me. But what she did was wrong, unforgivably wrong. She stole a baby from her mother, destroyed a family, and lived with that lie for 45 years. I'm angry at her for what she did, and I'm heartbroken that the woman I thought I knew was capable of something so cruel. But I'm also grateful beyond words to have found my real mother, to have this chance to know her and build a relationship with her, even though it came 45 years too late. The questions from reporters came fast and furious. How did we feel about each other? What legal action were we pursuing? Did we blame the hospital? What did we want to accomplish by going public? I answered as honestly as I could. I explained that while the hospital's security was inadequate in 1979, I held Margaret Brennan solely responsible for the crime. I said that Sarah and I were still getting to know each other, but that the connection between us was undeniable. I said that we were going public because the truth mattered, because accountability mattered, even when the perpetrator was beyond legal reach. Patricia Chen spoke about the legal aspects, confirming that we were considering a civil suit against Margaret Brennan's estate, though the details were still being worked out. Detective Morrison vouched for the validity of our evidence and confirmed that the Cedar Rapids Police Department considered the 1979 kidnapping case officially solved. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. By that afternoon, our story was on every major news outlet. By evening, it had gone viral on social media. People were outraged on our behalf, expressing sympathy and support. But there was also backlash, particularly from people in Waterloo who'd known Margaret, who remembered her as a kind woman and devoted mother, who didn't want to believe she could have done something so terrible. Sarah received angry messages from people who'd known her as Sarah Brennan, accusing her of trying to destroy Margaret's memory, of being ungrateful, of not appreciating everything Margaret had done for her. She received messages of support, too, from adoptees and others who discovered unsettling truths about their origins. But the negative messages hurt. I received messages, too, most supportive, but some questioning why I was attacking a dead woman who couldn't defend herself, why I couldn't just be grateful to have Sarah back, why I needed to drag this all into the public eye. Those messages infuriated me, as if I should protect the reputation of the woman who'd stolen my baby. As if I should be quiet and grateful instead of angry and demanding justice. But we pressed forward. Patricia filed a civil suit against Margaret Brennan's estate on our behalf, seeking financial damages for the pain and suffering caused by the kidnapping. It wasn't about the money, not really. Sarah didn't need it, and I didn't want it. But it was about making an official legal record, about having a court of law acknowledge what had been done to us. The estate tried to settle quietly, offering a sum of money if we dropped the suit and agreed to stop discussing the case publicly. We refused. We wanted a trial, wanted testimony, wanted everything on the public record. We wanted Margaret Brennan's crime to be officially and permanently documented. But we also knew that we needed to do more than just legal maneuvering and press conferences. We needed to channel our anger and pain into something productive, something that would prevent other families from experiencing what we'd endured. That's when Sarah and I decided to start an advocacy organization. We called it Sarah's Light, and its mission was to push for better hospital security protocols, to advocate for tracking systems that would prevent infant abduction, to provide resources for families dealing with similar situations. We wanted to turn our tragedy into something that could help others. We worked with hospital administrators, security experts, and law enforcement to develop recommendations. We pushed for mandatory security training for hospital staff, for better badge verification systems, for alarm systems on nursery doors, for infant tracking devices that would alert security if a baby was taken beyond certain boundaries. Some hospitals listened, others were resistant, citing costs and logistical challenges, but we kept pushing, kept advocating, kept telling our story anywhere people would listen. Sarah quit her job in social work to run the foundation full-time. I came out of retirement to help her, bringing my years of healthcare experience to bear on the problem. We became a formidable team, mother and daughter united in a common purpose, making up for lost time by working together towards something meaningful. Emma and Jack became involved too, helping with social media outreach, speaking at events, putting young faces on the issue, and showing the multi-generational impact of infant abduction. They were proud of their mother and their grandmother, they said, proud to be part of something important. David supported Sarah completely, taking on more household responsibilities so she could dedicate time to the foundation. He told me privately that he'd watched Sarah transform after finding me, watched her come alive in a way he'd never seen before. She always had this shadow over her, he said, this sense that something wasn't quite right about her identity. Now she knows who she is, where she comes from. She's complete in a way she never was before. The civil trial against Margaret Brennan's estate took place in the spring of 2025, just 6 months after Sarah had knocked on my door. The courtroom was packed with media and onlookers. Margaret's surviving relatives were there, including her sister Eleanor, a severe-looking woman in her 70s who glared at Sarah and me like we were the criminals. During the trial, we presented all our evidence: the newspaper clippings Margaret had kept, her confession letter, the fake hospital badge, the detailed notes she'd made while stalking me. We presented expert testimony about the psychological impact of infant abduction on birth mothers, about the long-term effects of discovering you were kidnapped as an infant. Margaret's estate tried to argue that while what she'd done was wrong, she'd also provided Sarah with a loving home and good life, and that should count for something. Their lawyer actually tried to claim that Margaret's mental illness from her miscarriages should be considered a mitigating factor, that she hadn't been in her right mind. I watched Patricia Chen demolish that argument. Mental illness does not excuse months of premeditated stalking and planning, she said coldly. Margaret Brennan was lucid enough to create fake credentials, to study hospital procedures, to execute a carefully planned crime. She was lucid enough to maintain the lie for 45 years. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she chose to do it anyway. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a verdict in our favor. They awarded us a significant sum in damages, money that we immediately pledged to the Sarah's Light Foundation. The legal victory felt good, felt validating, but it also felt hollow. No amount of money could give me back those lost years. No verdict could bring Daniel back to life. But the publicity from the trial helped spread awareness about infant abduction. Hospitals started reaching out to us, wanting to implement our recommended security protocols. Lawmakers began drafting legislation to mandate certain safety measures. Other victims of infant abduction contacted us, sharing their stories. Some reunited with their children like I was, others still searching. We created a registry and database, a resource for families to report suspicious activity, to share information, to support each other. We held annual conferences bringing together law enforcement, hospital administrators, and affected families. We lobbied for better funding for investigating cold cases involving missing children. Sarah and I became minor celebrities in certain circles, invited to speak at conferences and seminars, interviewed for documentaries about infant abduction. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, constantly reliving our trauma for public consumption. But it also felt purposeful, felt like we were taking our pain and transmuting it into something that could protect other families. I rebuilt my relationship with Sarah slowly, carefully, learning who she was as an adult, what she liked and disliked, her quirks and habits. I learned that she was allergic to shellfish, that she loved mystery novels, that she was terrible at remembering birthdays, but wonderful at random, thoughtful gestures. I learned that she inherited my stubbornness and Daniel's optimism, a combination that made her both determined and hopeful in the face of obstacles. She learned things about me too, about my love of gardening, my tendency to worry excessively, my habit of reorganizing things when I was stressed. She learned about her genetic family history, about the cancer that ran on my mother's side, about the heart disease from Daniel's family. Practical information, but also deeply meaningful, pieces of identity she'd never had before. We celebrated our first Christmas together, all of us, in my house. Sarah, David, Emma, Jack, and me. I cooked a turkey, and it came out dry because I was so nervous and distracted. Sarah made sweet potato casserole from a recipe Margaret had taught her, and we all agreed it was delicious, even as we acknowledged the complicated feelings that came with enjoying anything connected to Margaret. I gave Emma and Jack gifts I'd been saving for grandchildren I didn't think I'd ever have, jewelry and books and small treasures I'd collected over the years. I gave Sarah a photo album I'd put together with pictures of me and Daniel, of my parents and siblings, of the family she came from. She cried when she opened it, holding it like it was made of glass. She gave me a locket with a picture of baby Sarah from Margaret's photo albums on one side, and a recent photo of adult Sarah on the other. "So you can have all of me," she said, "the baby you lost and the woman I became." I wore that locket every day, touching it frequently like a talisman, a physical reminder that the miracle had really happened, that my daughter had really come home. It's been a year now since Sarah knocked on my door. A year of getting to know each other, of building Sarah's light, of processing our trauma and our anger and our joy. A year of learning how to be mother and daughter when we'd missed all the normal developmental stages of that relationship. We're still figuring it out. There are moments when it's awkward, when we don't quite know how to relate to each other, when the gap of 45 years feels too wide to bridge. But there are also moments of profound connection, when I see myself in her expressions or hear Daniel in her laugh, when the biological bond between us feels as strong as if we'd never been separated. The work of Sarah's Light continues. We've successfully lobbied for new legislation in 3 states requiring enhanced security measures in hospital maternity wards. We've provided consultation to over 50 hospitals on updating their security protocols. We've helped reunite 6 other families with children who'd been abducted as infants. 6 families who, like us, thought they'd never see their children again. Every time I hear about another reunion, another family made whole, I think about Daniel. I think about how much he would have loved this work, how proud he would have been of Sarah, how thrilled he would have been to meet Emma and Jack. The grief of him not being here to see this will never fully fade, but it's tempered by the knowledge that the search he started, the hope he never abandoned, has finally borne fruit. Margaret Brennan remains a complicated figure in our lives. Sarah struggles with her feelings about the woman who raised her, the cognitive dissonance of loving someone who committed such a terrible crime against someone else she loves. We've talked about it a lot in therapy, both individual and together. Sarah sees a therapist who specializes in adoption trauma, and I see one who works with parents of missing children. We also see a family therapist together, working through the unique challenges of our situation. The therapists have helped us understand that we can hold multiple truths simultaneously. Margaret was both a loving mother to Sarah and a criminal who stole a baby. Sarah can both grieve the loss of the woman who raised her and be angry about the lies and the crime. I can be grateful that my daughter was raised in a loving home while also maintaining my anger at being robbed of the chance to raise her myself. We've learned to give each other grace, to understand that our perspectives and feelings about everything that happened will sometimes differ, and that's okay. What matters is that we're committed to being in each other's lives, to building a relationship that honors both the pain of our past and the hope of our future. Eleanor, Margaret's sister, eventually reached out to Sarah several months after the trial. She apologized for her initial hostility, said she'd been in shock and denial about what her sister had done. She shared stories about Margaret's earlier years, before the miscarriages and the mental breakdown, painting a picture of a woman who'd started out kind and caring before pain and desperation twisted her into someone capable of terrible things. "I don't expect you to forgive her," Eleanor told Sarah during their meeting. "I'm not sure I can fully forgive her myself, but I wanted you to know that the woman who stole you wasn't always that person. The miscarriages broke something in her that she never fully healed from. That doesn't excuse what she did, but maybe it helps explain it." Sarah appreciated the conversation, appreciated Eleanor's honesty and willingness to engage despite the painful circumstances. They maintain occasional contact now, an unexpected connection bridging the gap between Sarah's two families. "I've made peace with the fact that I'll never get those 45 years back. I'll never get to hold baby Sarah, to watch her take her first steps, to send her off to her first day of school, to help her pick out a prom dress, to walk her down the aisle at her wedding. Those experiences were stolen from me, and no amount of justice or advocacy work will return them. But I have Sarah now. I have Emma and Jack. I have the opportunity to be a grandmother in real time, to attend Jack's science fairs and Emma's drama performances, to have Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations, to be a part of their lives as they grow into adults. I have the chance to know my daughter as the remarkable woman she's become, to see the ways she's thrived despite the bizarre circumstances of her childhood. And I have purpose. The work of Sarah's light gives meaning to the pain, transforms our tragedy into something that protects other families. Every time we implement new security protocols at a hospital, every time we help another family reunite, every time we raise awareness about infant abduction, we're honoring the 45 years we lost by ensuring others don't lose the same. I'm 71 years old now. I don't know how many years I have left, how long Sarah and I will have together. But I'm determined to make the most of every day, to build as many memories as we can, to love each other as fiercely and completely as I would have if she'd never been taken. People sometimes ask if I've truly forgiven Margaret Brennan. The honest answer is no. I don't think I'll ever forgive her for what she did, for the pain she caused, for the life she stole from me and Daniel and Sarah. Forgiveness isn't required for healing, I've learned. I can acknowledge the complexity of who Margaret was. I can accept that she loved Sarah in her own way. I can even feel a strange sort of gratitude that she raised my daughter with care and devotion, all while still maintaining my anger at her crime. What I have found is a way to live with it, to carry the weight of what happened without letting it crush me. I've found a way to hold both the grief of what I lost and the joy of what I've found. I've learned that life is more complicated than simple narratives of good and evil, that people can be both loving and cruel, that terrible wrongs can somehow coexist with small mercies. The knock on my door that Tuesday afternoon changed everything. It gave me back my daughter, gave me grandchildren I'd never expected to have, gave me a purpose I'd been searching for since Daniel died. It also forced me to confront the reality of what happened, to process 45 years of grief all at once, to navigate the impossible complexity of our situation. If I could go back to that moment in 1979 and change things, prevent Margaret from taking Sarah, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would trust my instincts about that woman in the grocery store. I would question the fake nurse with the survey. I would insist Sarah stay in my room that first night. I would do anything to prevent the theft that shattered my life. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is move forward, taking our pain and our loss and our hard-won wisdom and using it to build something better. I want to share something with you, something I've learned through this entire experience, something that might help if you're facing your own seemingly impossible situation. I've learned that it's never too late for truth to come to light. It's never too late for justice, even if that justice looks different than what we originally imagined. It's never too late to rebuild, to reconnect, to reclaim pieces of ourselves we thought were lost forever. For 45 years, I believed my daughter was gone. For 45 years, I mourned her as if she were dead, because in a way she was. The baby Sarah I knew existed for less than a day before being stolen. But that baby grew into a woman, a wonderful woman who, despite everything, found her way home. If you're listening to this and you've experienced a similar loss, a similar tragedy, I want you to know that hope is not foolish. Continuing to search is not naive. Refusing to give up is not weakness. You never know when that knock might come on your door, when that phone call might ring through, when the impossible might suddenly become reality. And if you're listening to this and you've discovered something troubling about your own origins, about lies you were told or truths that were hidden from you, know that you're not alone. Know that it's possible to hold conflicting feelings about the people who raised you, to love them and be angry at them simultaneously. Know that seeking truth doesn't make you ungrateful, doesn't negate the good parts of your relationship, doesn't make you a bad person. The work Sarah and I do through Sarah's Light is my way of making meaning from the meaningless, of wringing purpose from pain. Every family we help, every child we protect, every protocol we implement is a monument to the years we lost, a testament to the love that survived despite everything. If there's one thing I want you to take away from my story, it's this. Truth matters. Justice matters. Accountability matters. Even when the person who wronged you is beyond legal reach, even when the world tells you to move on and be grateful for what you have, even when pursuing justice seems futile or vindictive, your pain matters. Your truth matters. And you deserve to have it acknowledged. Margaret Brennan stole my baby and got away with it for 45 years. She died without facing criminal charges, without serving a day in prison, without experiencing legal consequences for her crime. But she didn't get away with it completely, because Sarah and I made sure the world knew what she did. We made sure her crime was documented, investigated, and officially solved. We made sure that when people remember Margaret Brennan, they don't just remember a devoted mother and dedicated nurse, they also remember that she was a kidnapper who destroyed lives for her own selfish desires. That's not perfect justice. It's not what I would have chosen if I could have written the ending to this story. But it's something. It's accountability. It's truth. And it's given me a measure of peace that I didn't think was possible. I've also learned that family is more than biology, but biology still matters. The instant connection I felt with Sarah, the way we slipped so easily into certain patterns of relating to each other, the physical similarities between us that became more apparent the more time we spent together. These things are real and significant. But so is the family Sarah built with Margaret and Thomas. The years of memories and experiences they shared, the love that existed even if it was built on lies. We contain multitudes, all of us. We're capable of holding complexity, of navigating nuance, of finding our way through situations that seem impossible. Sarah is both Sarah Mitchell and Sarah Brennan, both my daughter and Margaret's daughter, both a victim and a survivor, and a fighter, and a mother, and a professional, and 1,000 other things. I am both a grieving mother who lost 45 years with her child, and a joyful grandmother building new memories, and an advocate working to protect other families, and a widow still mourning my husband, and a woman who's learned to find happiness despite unbearable pain. We're all more than the worst things that have happened to us. We're all more than our traumas, our losses, our scars. And we all have the capacity to take our suffering and transform it into something that serves others, that makes the world a little bit safer, or kinder, or more just. Thank you for listening to my story, for making it all the way to the end with me. If you felt something while hearing this, if it's touched you or made you think or helped you process your own experiences, I have one final request. Please consider liking this video if you haven't already, subscribing to this channel if you want to hear more real stories from real women like me, and leaving a comment sharing your thoughts or telling me where you're watching from. These simple actions help this channel grow. Help these stories reach more people who might need to hear them. Help build a community of people who believe that truth and justice matter, even when they're complicated and messy and imperfect. Your support means everything, not just to me, but to every woman whose story gets told here. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for being part of this community, for listening, for caring, for showing up. My name is Lorraine Mitchell. My baby was stolen from the hospital 45 years ago, and against all odds, impossibly, miraculously, she found her way home. It's never too late for truth. It's never too late for justice. It's never too late for love to find a way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, whatever you're facing, however impossible it seems, don't give up hope. You never know when that knock might come on your door, when your life might change in ways you can't imagine, when the miracle you've stopped believing in might suddenly, beautifully, become real.